Hello, everyone, and welcome to today's Tuesday topic. Today's topic is why diversity, equity, and inclusion matters in academia. All right, so we are ready to go. Let me throw it over to Dr. Veronica Carey, who is our moderator for today. And thanks for coming, Dr. Carey.
All right, great. Thank you, Darren. I really appreciate it. So I'm glad to see there's already about almost 30 of us in the room right now. So outstanding. Hopefully a lot more of us will be able to join. Again, I'm Dr. Veronica Carey. I am the Assistant Dean for Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. I'm also the chair for the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. My pronouns are she, her, hers. I am a cisgender, married, heterosexual, African-American female with a PhD, a certification in psychiatric rehabilitation. I am a mother, a recent grandmother. Anyone who knows me will know I can stop you long enough. I'll show you that. Sister, mentor, and friend. So I wanted to introduce myself in terms of all the things that, and there's probably a whole host of others, but I'll stop there in terms of what makes Veronica who she is. So I wanted to be able to introduce myself under those parameters. And let's see, Dr. Brooks, would you like to also share?
Yes, hello everyone. For those of you who are unaware, haven't met me before, I am the Senior Associate Dean for Health Professions and Faculty Affairs. And I am a cisgender African-American divorced single parent of 2 adult daughters, which is really key to how I see the world. I am an advocate, an educator, and a clinician.
All right, outstanding, outstanding. And Dr. Montgomery, if you can share with us too.
Hi, thank you so much for coming. I am Dr. Kim Montgomery. I am the Senior Associate Dean of Nursing. I am a cisgender, divorced, remarried, Caucasian female. I am also a mother of 6 children, a mother-in-law. I am a grandmother, a daughter, a nurse practitioner, a wife, a fur baby mom, a sister, friend, and mentor.
Excellent, excellent. So I wanted us to be able to introduce ourselves probably in parameters that are unfamiliar to people in terms of, we usually just say, hi, I'm Dr. Carey and your immediate role, but so many other things come to the table in terms of who makes us what we are, and also the intersections between the 3 of us. So I hope that you were able to hear that even though there may be some dissimilarities, there are a lot of intersections between the 3 of us. So we need to be conscious of those intersections throughout the day as well. So why are we talking about, why does DEI matter within CNHP, namely within our College of Nursing and Health Professions? One of the themes that I have for the ongoing year, as Dr. Brooks is already fully aware, is I talk about how you do not have to be in pain to get a degree. And a part of that has to deal with our discussions today of the elements that come in within the climate, the culture of what we're creating, sustaining, need to be removing from CNHP. So that whether it be our faculty might be in pain, or maybe in terms of professional staff and students, but primarily looking at our outcome population, which is our students. And I hope that there are a wealth of students on today's call to see that you do not have to be in pain to get a degree, nor should people be living and working in a climate that's uncomfortable for them. So this is why DEI matters in terms of CNHP is a microcosm of the world. So if we see it here, we're going to see it out there. If we're not able to address it here or reduce it here, then we are remiss in what we're helping students to gain when they're no longer with us. For those students that have ever had me in the past, you've heard me say, I want you to be successful when I'm not around. And diversity, equity, and inclusion most certainly comes under that successability. So we have to make sure that we dialogue about that. So, and also we want to look at, and I'm kind of setting some frameworks here so you can see why we inserted the information and the material that we have and the tools that we're going to use throughout this afternoon for the next 50 some odd minutes. So what does it mean if persons are operating feeling unprotected? So why are we talking about diversity, equity, inclusion at CNHP? Because persons may feel unprotected throughout the day. And I want to say persons means our faculty, our professional staff, and or our students. Some persons feel othered. Some feel scared. They're going about their day feeling scared. That's important for us to recognize. And it could be, it probably does come under one of those 3 parameters. Maybe they're unsure. Some might be dealing with imposter syndrome. Some might be looking at being a first-generation student and don't know how to navigate an academic environment. Maybe someone is unmentored. And again, maybe someone's feeling a sense of shame while they're here. Maybe someone is an international student and they don't have support, whether it be, or I should say international, whether they be faculty, professional staff, or students, and there's no support there. So why are we talking about DEI? To reduce those things, to address those things, and to minimize the ones that we need to minimize and enhance the ones that we need to enhance. So what I've done here is I've generated a Mentimeter session for all of us. So in terms of, we want to hear your voice. This is an opportunity. This is totally anonymous. We're not going to know how people are voting in this and who's sharing what. So why diversity should matter to health professionals. We'll take a look at that in terms of our first Mentimeter question. So for those of you that were able to link in here, how important do you think diversity is in an academic setting? Good, 5 say very. Again, Dr. Brooks and Dr. Montgomery, we can exchange, we can respond interchangeably across these slides. And I want to, okay, 17, oh, we have no variance here, 18. So how important do you think diversity is in an academic setting? So we have about 29 people that have already voted. Great. If anybody else wants to join in, if you're just joining us, you'll see at the top of the screen, if you can see my cursor here, we've all joined into www.menti.com and we plugged in this code, which allows us to universally see this presentation. So good, now we're up to 30, someone just joined us, great. So I want to think about this again, against the framework that I just set out. People do not have to be in pain to be in academia, whether it be faculty, professional staff, or students. We want to make sure that we look at CNHP as a microcosm of the world, and we want to make sure that people that feel unprotected across those parameters that I shared before may not experience that so much. So how important do you think diversity is in an academic setting? So I would agree that in terms of, so most of you said very. So here, the definition of diversity areas where you can be similar and dissimilar to someone else. So again, thinking about the fact that we're trying to graduate, work with, grow people beyond the day you meet them so they can be successful in your absence, always then does parlay back to curriculum, to textbooks, to faculty presentations, to questions asked in class, graduation ceremonies, responses to students. All this comes under the climate of CNHP across many of these areas, if not more. So race, age, ethnicity, physical abilities, whether they be visible or invisible, right? Gender, religious beliefs, sexual orientation. So why is it important to address diversity? Because we see it every single day. It comes into class, it sits next to someone else, it raises its hand. We cannot be divorced from the fact that these things impact every classroom setting. So how does it and why is it important to address? Because if we didn't address it, there's no one sitting there. And I think that when the three of us introduced ourselves, you might have heard race, you might have heard ethnicity, you might have heard culture as a part of how we address different parameters of who we are. So it is very important for diversity to be addressed in an academic environment. So what do you think is a synonym for equity? Here's a chance for you to type in, I believe, up to 3 words, whatever you think in terms of parlays into equity. So we've kind of taken a quick snapshot of diversity, but what about equity? That's right. Honesty, oh, that's a new one. Transparency, okay. Same. Okay, intentional support. All right. That's a deep one. Okay. Equity, equal opportunity. All right. Even playing field. So I'm sure that for a lot of us, this is a very, very familiar conversation. You've probably been to training after training about DEI, about diversity, equity, and inclusion. However, oftentimes equality and equity end up being that synonym moment, and they're very, very different. Drexel is able to say that they are an equal opportunity university. That means that they will have, there's access for persons who could be or might be dissimilar to another person. They have access. They can be there. They can be present. It's very different than equity. Equity means while the person's there, they can participate seamlessly like the majority population can. Let me say that again. Equality talks about the ability to be present in a space or time, group, class, meeting, etc. Equal, equal access. You might have heard that term, equal access. That's what it means. It's almost redundant. Equity talks about while they're there and they're asking and seeking to participate, how seamless is that participation? That's equity. So therefore, again, you might have seen this. This individual, I would assume this to be a soccer match. So we'll just call this soccer. And this individual is watching with a little crate, a little box, and it can very much participate, has access, presence is not a problem. This person is also present watching the soccer match. A little bit more work needs to be involved, even though there's a box here for this person. This person with a visible disability is present, but cannot witness even though they have access, they are there, they were invited. They could say that there's a person with disability who went to the game, but they were not able to participate. They couldn't see the game. This individual did not need the box in order to be successful. If in the event that this person in the future would need the box, then of course we would have the box available again. This person needed 2 boxes to be successful, so we offered more support, right? For some persons, even over here with the ramp, we might even call this an accommodation, right? We're going to make whatever it needs. That, don't forget, the overarching theme is that people do not have to be in pain to get a degree. So in other words, if this person needs, because some people on this rung might say, well, why do they get, right? That's a climate question. Why do they get 2 boxes? Why do they get? Because right now you don't need them to participate. And if something happens in your future and you need support, it'll be offered to you as well. So the synonyms, a lot of people mentioned some very good synonyms back here in terms of, what is a synonym for equity? But it also, people sometimes will think it means equality, and equality really just means the ability to be present. And equity means the satisfaction, the seamless participation while I'm there. Dr. Brooks or Dr. Montgomery, did you want to add anything?
I do. I was struck by, and I can't remember the second word, but that word of intentional. And when I think about equity, this is one way to facilitate equity, but I think about making structural and systemic changes. So if you create policies with the ideal that, of who you are creating these policies for, you create them in a way that everyone has access, and that it's equitable. So you build it in that way. So when we think about building our curriculum, we should be thinking about building our curriculum in such a way that it is inclusive for everyone. And that way it continues to be equitable for all. And the same is true for, our hiring practice with faculty and supporting them throughout their process, and our professional staff. So I lean more towards looking at things structural and systemically. And when I'm thinking about DEI.
Thank you. Absolutely. Absolutely. Dr. Montgomery, did you want to share anything?
No, I just want to say that I agree with Dr. Brooks. I really think that this is bigger than CNHP, although we talk about CNHP, and that we all have to work very hard to make sure that it's our system. It starts at the university higher levels, and filters its way down to be successful. So thank you, Dr. Brooks.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that, the goal up here, I mentioned several goals when we first started talking in terms of the conversation, right? So we want to make sure that all 3 stakeholders, not just our students, but our students are our primary outcome, experience success within those areas I had mentioned earlier, right? And we're going to get back, I'm going to kind of summarize it again by repeating what those goals are. But again, keeping with the overall theme is that you don't have to be in pain to get a degree. So let's move on. So in terms of, oops, someone already voted. So, okay, hello. So do you think implicit bias impacts diversity, equity, inclusion, or all 3? I think these 3 people were Leos, because because they started already. I feel you. $18, good. Do you think implicit bias impacts diversity, equity, inclusion, or all three? Excellent, excellent. I think we're missing one person from last time. There we go. There we go. Excellent. And it's so important to have these anonymous, moments so we can kind of really share what's on our minds, or where we're not familiar with something. I mean, we talk about implicit bias all the time, but we don't necessarily understand, where does it come from? How does it originate? If someone, cornered us and said, what's the definition of it, right? But again, it does impact how we see the world, what our lens is constituted by. And we're going to look at quite literally how our lens is actually generated and how we see the world, for how we respond to each other, or how we reflect to students, or how we prioritize events in the classroom. So each one of those things does impact and does come under diversity, equity, and inclusion. And I would agree that the answer would be that all three are impacted by implicit bias. So very, very quickly, for those not to reiterate definitions here, but in terms of implicit bias is defined as the attitudes or stereotypes that affect our understanding, actions, and decisions. That means it's a day at Drexel, it's a day at CNHP. Every day we bring our stereotypes, every day we bring our understanding of how we should approach things. Maybe we approach it differently than our peer. Maybe we approach it similarly to our peer. Professionals should make an effort to explore their own implicit biases, because there's no one alive who doesn't have one. And I would be surprised if people only have one bias. I could probably enumerate several biases that I happen to have, so they can identify unconscious decisions and actions that may negatively affect the communities that they serve. What's the community who faculty, professional staff, and students serve is CNHP in this conversation. How can these things be imparted or impacted or carried out in the classroom day? We'll see them in terms of microaggressions, macroaggressions, othering people, insecurity, safety, not feeling self. Exactly, right? All those things that we had mentioned and enumerated earlier. Some may say, well, how do we get them? Where do they come from? Well, when I learned this, I've used this in a couple of sessions I've done for CNHP. So for those of you that might have seen this before, that's great. Let's hope you remember where they all come from. So the amygdala is associated with automatic responses to stimuli, fear, fight, or flight responses. It's stored there. So perhaps you're a small child and you see that your mother clutches. I'm going to use the more like, universal clutch your pocketbook moment. And you're like, well, why is mommy clutching her pocketbook every time? And then you store that. You don't have to clutch your pocketbook. You can watch someone else demonstrate the fear, fight, and flight response. You can still store the same amount of emotional load as the person who's clutching their pocketbook. That's stored in your amygdala. Your temporal lobes store basic information about individuals and social stereotypes. Well, now as we get older and we see things that are maybe in the community or on TV or in social media or at our own cookouts or at our own Christmas parties or our own Hanukkah celebrations, we're going to store those different things, that basic information about individuals and social. Now we have amygdala storing things, we have our temporal lobe storing things, and we have our prefrontal, our frontal cortex. Some of our students are young enough where their frontal cortex hasn't even fused yet, right? So we're associated with reasoning, first impressions, and empathy. This could be why maybe some of our younger students are less empathetic to their peers, right? So they need to be able to associate different things and then reason for why they have them, a reason for why they occur. So reasoning, first impressions, and empathy. Literally all of this comes under the where and how, or the regions of the brain related to implicit bias activation. So the second we see something that might be quote unquote a trigger for us, it gets activated. Why? It's going through these different parts of our brain and grabbing what our historical synapses are and saying, yeah, every time I run into those people, this is what I hear them say, or yep, my grandfather told me that those individuals, and that's where it all gets stored and comes from. How we act on that is how we have to retrain the brain. So, but it's amazing though, how much similarity we have in terms of our approaches and our own implicit biases. So for those of you that are here with us, if you could grab a piece of scrap paper, just anything, right on your calendars. It's not going to be very long, but it's an exercise to kind of prove something about the strategies to mitigate implicit bias in clinical practice. Clinical practice goes across nursing and health professions. So it's a very, very apropos exercise. Again, I did this recently with the new faculty orientation, to which people were like, what? So let's see if we get a similar what response when we do this exercise. So again, in the essence of time, please number your papers from 1 to 11. 1 to 11. Now, I'm not a math person. I am in behavioral health counseling for a reason, can barely add. So I'm going to take this slowly for you, in case you're similar to me. All right, so number 1, very simple. I can do this myself as well. Think of a number from 1 to 10 and write the number down on that line. A number from 1 to 10 and write it down. Now, here comes the struggle. Whatever number is on line 1, add 2 to it and put that number on the second line. Line 3, whatever you have in line 2, double that number and put it on line 3. Okay. Not line 4, whatever you had in line 1, subtract that number from line 3. So subtract your original number and place that number on line 4. Hope I didn't lose anybody yet. All right, Dr. Brooks said no, I guess that's everybody. Okay. All right, line 5, add 8. To whatever number you have there, add 8. All right, line 6, again, subtract your original number. All right, we're almost finished. Line 7. All right, Kim, I hope I don't lose you on this one. Maybe you're better at math than I am. Divide by 3. Don't worry about point something something. Just divide by 3. Okay. All right, math is done. Thank you, whoever you pray to. Thank you, Jesus. All right, line 8. Find the corresponding letter of the alphabet to your number. If you have a 1, it's an A. If you have a 2, it's a B. 3, it's a C. 4, it's a D. All right. 5, it's an E. And keep going. All right. Now, line 9. Think of a country that starts with that letter. Number 10, think of an animal that starts with the last letter of that country. Okay, and the last one, again, thank you, whoever you pray to. Number 11, think of a fruit that starts with the last letter of that animal. All right, so here's the question. How many of you had Denmark, kangaroo, orange? Amanda, I can see one hand up. Kim, Martha, Denmark, kangaroo, orange. Oh, so we are having some, what? All right, oh, I see Martha, oh, Beth. Excellent. Denmark, kangaroo. Oh, Jim Hines. Hi, Jim. I haven't seen you this year yet. Denmark, kangaroo, orange. It's amazing. Levon. Oh, see, there's that moment. You're like, what? I just did numbers. How is that possible, right? And some people didn't get Denmark, kangaroo, orange. Absolutely. And again, I can't see everyone's hands going up, but this is what tends to happen in terms of we are looking not we, maybe the 30 or some odd that are on this call, I could be preaching to the choir. But we talked about, we first introduced ourselves by the intersectionality of, or who we are. Then we identify the intersections of who we are. Now we're demonstrating even more so that there's so much connectivity between who's on this call and how we see the world than difference. But we spend a heck of a lot of time identifying those differences. How can we possibly be an African-American female from New Jersey or from Ghana, or a white Caucasian male from Mississippi, and still get Denmark kangaroo orange? Because at some point, we have to understand that we were acculturated the same way. There's something either in our educational postures or in our friendship pools, our conversations, our similarities. There's a lot of these things that happen. However, it requires healthcare professionals to check in with themselves on a regular basis to ensure that they are acting based on a rational assessment of their clinical situations rather than on stereotypes and prejudices. So those persons who didn't get Denmark kangaroo orange, they'd probably be great people to maybe say, oh, you didn't, so how do you see this? How do you think we can change our curriculum? Or what do you think we're missing when we're addressing how we're going to decolonize our course rooms? What's missing in the conversation? Because if we're seemingly seeing things similarly, then we should really be listening to those outliers. And I don't know who the outliers are, who I guess people could take their raised hands down and maybe someone else could say, I didn't have that. But it's really going to be important to listen to that, or we're going to continue doing things the way we do them, and we're not going to be able to change and grow beyond the day that we're going to be meeting each other and entering into these conversations. So I just wanted to point out that how could I possibly meet you today and then throw you all into one pool saying Denmark kangaroo orange? Did you realize that? I think Stephanie, you're on mute. I think I saw you. Oh, there you go.
I am on mute. I was looking at Jennifer's response because I had Dominican Republic cat and tangerine, and Jennifer has Dominican Republic cat and tomato.
Oh,
so I was like, yay!
Yeah, someone's out there, right? There's some intersections there. Absolutely, absolutely. Very good. Yes, Jennifer. Yes.
And I had Dominican Republic cougar and raspberry.
Ah, cougar and raspberry, Dominican Republic cougar and raspberry. Okay, all right. So again, it could be some different ideals, different ways of viewing things for how, we can grow beyond and get to those goals that we identified when we first started. And then I just wanted to end with the seeds of bias. So when we talked about the implicit bias, the way that we can unpack this and the way we can make changes for why diversity, equity, inclusion matters at CNHP. We're going to act like that didn't happen. Similarity is best approached by exposure to difference. That's why diversity is so important. Diversity is critical. Equality must happen. Equity is a goal. Expedience, best approached by mandating attention to the status quo, right? In terms of who's mastering things for right now, who are our puppeteers, if you will, and how we can make those changes. Experience, best approached by seeking to see the world with a new lens. Well, we got a lot of Denmark kangaroo orange. We start listening to our cougars, listening to our raspberries, listening to our Dominican Republics, listening to our distance, best approached by using technology to make the world smaller, offering the idea not that much of a difference. So we have online courses, we have hybrid sessions, right? We have international students and international professional staff and international faculty. And then safety, best approached by teams to reduce cognitive bottlenecks, right? Again, evidenced by our mitigating and reducing our implicit biases and pointing out the bias of other team members. And in order to grow, we can't have people sitting back and saying, well, I don't want to hear that. I don't understand why we're even talking about that. How is that going to make a change? If you keep, I don't think that people should be in pain to get a degree, then you're going to be like, okay, you know what? I should be listening better. I should be listening differently. I should put something aside in order to actually hear this. And then one of the things that's happening within the university, I thought I hit it once, within CNHP is our board. So you have all of these individuals that had applied for the Board of Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion. This is our current board. Very, very proud of these individuals that are going to be working towards reaching these goals right? Satisfying some of the questions and comments, whether it be student-based or whether it be faculty-based or staff-based, professional staff-based. So you have a hodgepodge across here. One of the things I love about this image is you cannot tell who are the players without a scorecard. So you can't tell who are faculty, professional staff, and students. We are a team, we are a board, and we're a working board. And you will be seeing many opportunities to learn more about diversity, equity, inclusion, for why it's important in academia by attending the events and the trainings, et cetera, that are going to come out of this board of diversity. So I just wanted to take you, a little love note. Thank you so much, whoever gave us a love note on that moment. So, more. So I really do, it's probably the board members. So I really do appreciate that we took the time to kind of go through this exercise today. It shows where we're together. It shows we can do this. We already demonstrated Denmark kangaroo orange. We're all in it. We're all in it. But we're going to have to realize what we need to do to get better at it. All right. So thank you for taking, you can kind of put the mentee thing away now. A book called Eureka Moment. Jennifer Nasser said that there's a book called Eureka Moment that teaches, and again, I can't read the full thing, but thank you, Jennifer. And if we need to, Amanda and I will use it as a resource after today's call to share.
Yeah, it's by a Drexel faculty person in psychology, John Cunos.
Outstanding.
And there are a lot of simple exercises of very common situations, and it walks you through, and then you can come up with a different response.
Outstanding. Thank you for that resource. We always love resources in academia. Thank you. No, seriously, that's great. All right. So now we're going to get into an example of some of the things that our board has offered historically. I'm going to kind of sit back after this video is finished. I've kind of talked a lot, and I'll have Dr. Brooks and Dr. Montgomery as leadership within nursing and health professions. I guess opposite. I said Brooks, Montgomery, health professions and nursing, address what we have heard over the last year. And for those of you that maybe, I had this big each one reach one, right, Darren? That, as people start registering for things, go and find someone else and say, hey, did you also register? Because these things are going to help us with this climate and the goals that we're setting. So we'll show this as a collage of what happened last year.
We did want to start with just a moment of silence for George Floyd and all the other victims of racial violence in this country, of which there are many. So please do join me for a moment of silence.
Preparing for this conversation, it was very much around this idea of like, well, now what? Like, now what are we doing? Now what is this demographic? What are white women doing, not doing, going back to their Netflix series and their, spin classes? How are we continuing to hold ourselves to account what it is that we're doing with our institutions that in some cases have, built DEI departments and hired amazing talent to push the conversation, have committed large chunks of money, but it's a little bit like, well, now we actually have to do the work. Right?
Stand around, don't just stand around. All we want to do is be free. All we want to do is be free. All we want to do is take the chains off.
That was J. Cole, AKA one of the most important artists of our generation. Initial thoughts.
Got a pit in my stomach.
Michelle, tell me why. Why is there a pit in your stomach?
The idea of, taking the chains off and just how there are just so many systems that are in place that still have to be dismantled. There's just so many obstacles. And, that's, I think, where the pit is coming from. That there's still so much to do.
Given the events of the past 2 years, it's also worth reflecting on how much has to happen for this country to find a murderer of a Black man guilty and a police officer of a Black man guilty. Like, so much went into producing this verdict for what should just be justice.
So this is a visual I like to use called the Genderbred Person. It's available at genderbred.org, created by Sam Killerman. It kind of explains the different aspects of a person. There's gender identity, gender expression, anatomical or biological sex, sexual attraction and romantic attraction, and none of these things are the same as any of the others. None of them necessarily determines any of the others. There is a ton of information on this website if you want to take a look at any point, but they're all of these aspects of the person are independent of each other and not necessarily connected.
I specifically remember being one of the few Black students, and then you cut it even deeper, being one of the few Black males within psychology coursework. One of the things that I noticed was really interesting is that we never really talked about the intersections of race and mental health. I had to seek out sociology courses, gender and women's studies courses, to really get that other aspect of what I wanted out of my college experience.
For me, I guess that is the loneliness and the cultural shock is like predominantly something that, and if COVID hadn't hit, maybe by now, a lot of us, or me personally, I would have become accustomed to all this. But now with COVID, I can't get into contact with like a lot of people. I was starting to make new friends.
Something that stood out to me was how cognizant I was of how I presented in class. I made sure that when I came to class, I used my best standard English. I wanted to make sure that my diction was appropriate. I was using proper English, which I think is a problematic statement. But using the most standard English that I could access at the time, because I wanted to make sure that everyone knew that I was smart and that I got here because I was smart and not because of affirmative action. Which
is something that's impacting every person, but especially Black individuals and persons of color. I think that I've been thinking a lot about recently as a white person, notably as a white male, how I'm feeling. I'm aware of my anger, but I think I'm also tuning in more to the shame underneath that's frequently there. And I think that's associated with governments and institutions, their policies, procedures that continue to render people, notably Black people, invisible. I also think that I believe that the journey to becoming aware of one's privilege, notably one's white privilege, is something that you spend a lifetime doing. It's work every day.
I wanted to share that when I started graduate school, I naively believed that therapy would be enough to help people solve most of their problems, and then quickly learned that many psychological problems are really the result of systemic failures, and that systemic problems really require systemic solutions. So I am always eager to learn more about how I, as a psychologist and as a human in the world, can really use my expertise and privilege to challenge and dismantle the systems of oppression in which marginalized groups are embedded, and that includes groups that I, personally identify with as well as others.
So Dr. Brooks and Dr. Montgomery, if you'd like to respond to some of the highlights of what we illustrated in the video collage.
Sure, I'll start with some of my initial thoughts. And one thing that struck me, which I think is really important for us when we're talking about DEI is the ability to be authentic. And so as I was listening to J. Cole, like all I want to do is be free. I mean, it's as simple as being able to be your authentic self, whether it's speaking standard English or, being, sort of aware that you're the end of one in a class and people may not get you or understand you. And so you have to twist yourself to communicate in a way that is not how you typically would communicate. And I'm not talking about English and necessarily. I'm talking about everything from I like you, Dr. Carey, I speak with my hands. And sometimes I become very passionate. And so watching that and paying attention to that, because I'm not sure how people are going to receive it. I was also thinking about the now what? Now we actually have to do the work, and we're all overwhelmed day to day, and oftentimes I listen to comments about we're trying to do too much around DEI in the college, but we can't slow down. We need to continue to do the work and try to move the needle. There never will be a good time to do the work. And then the other piece that struck me was systemic problems require systemic solutions. And, this fits into one of my identities as an advocate. I too came to therapy with the notion that my goal early on, I'll go to school, I'll get educated, I will open up my own clinic, I will treat my own people, I will make sure that they have quality services. Not a bad goal. Still something that I engage in. But then I realized throughout the journey that I'm far more effective if I'm in the classroom, bringing these issues to students, to the curriculum. I'm far more effective if I continue to participate in administration, disrupting, systems of oppression and creating opportunities to do something different. And and that really resonates with me. And that's where, the leadership's at when CNHP at this point is really looking at ways in which we can disrupt the systems that currently exist. Yes, the university currently has their own policies and procedures, as Dr. Montgomery talked about, but we still have a lot of things that we can do within the college from a policy perspective that will inform our practice, that will also cultivate a different climate. It's about our students, faculty, and professional staff, but as health providers, it's about our clients as well. It's about our patients that we get this right. So I'll stop there.
If I may, I'd just like to comment on a couple things. I think being different or difference is something that is throughout our history, right? We've been different forever. We have never embraced difference. We've actually done quite the opposite. And I'm thrilled, not the way it's all unfolded of why everybody's finally looking at DEI, but difference is going to be part of our future. And coming into a situation where everybody is the same, and if you're different, that makes you an other. And I heard Dr. Carey talk about other, it makes you an other. And instead of embracing another, we seek out people who think the same. And in a classroom, in an institution, for people who teach healthcare students who will be taking care of patients later on, embracing difference now and understanding it gives so much growth to whatever you're discussing in class. Dr. Brooks and I and Dr. Carey did some listening sessions throughout the year where we just invited students who signed up, and it was called Dismantling Racism. And we didn't say much. We just listened to the students who came and listened to their perception of what it's like to bring up issues in, whatever's in the public eye at the time, important issues that affect them, whether it's a gender issue, a socioeconomic economic status issue, a race issue, and it weighs heavy and they bring it to class and they need to be able to speak about it and have interesting conversations where they're heard, respectful conversations where both the faculty and other students are able to talk about it, to be able to unload together and learn from each other in the classroom. And I will say that that's not an easy thing for the student or even the faculty to do, because when something happens that's very public and uncomfortable, we tend to say, okay, that's nice, let's move on. And learning how to infuse that in the curriculum is something that has to be learned by everybody, no matter what you identify yourself as. So now we actually have to do the work. Now, what really strikes me, because again, you know, difference has been a part of our history. It's a sad thing that we haven't embraced it to this point. And again, what it's taken to get us to this point. But now we have to do the work. That's right. We should have been doing the work a long time, but now we have to learn to do the work. The second thing that struck me, and then I'll be quiet, is implicit bias on the previous, I guess they were slides. Every single one of us, as Dr. Carey said, has implicit bias. It is the hardest thing to recognize that you have implicit bias. It takes a lot of work and everyday work. And even if you have an implicit bias, recognize it and saying, okay, I feel this way. I have this implicit bias. And where you put it and what you do with it is extremely important. It's more dangerous, most dangerous, when you don't recognize your own. Like, you know, they say it's more scary what you know you don't know, right? That you should know. So starting to learn about yourself as an instructor, a professional staff, as a student, so you know what you're bringing into the classroom, what you're unpacking to other people, and what in the future you're going to be bringing into the patient or patient care is crucial. And I'll shut up.
All right, outstanding, outstanding. We have a minute or two, and I'll try to navigate this, and maybe anyone can help me. But if you want to throw your hand up and tell us why you think DEI, diversity, equity, and inclusion matters in academia, and then we'll summarize with our the statement of our goals. Is there anyone that I think if you raise your hand, then I can. Who's speaking?
I'm sorry. I was sitting there with, sorry, this is Dr. Way.
Hi, Dr. Way.
Hi. Hi, everybody. Let's see. I think in listening to everybody's, you know, their input and what has been said, I think one of the bigger issues, and Dr. Montgomery, just to follow up on what you were saying, and I'm hoping after this meeting, we continue to have more, because what I've noticed and seen as we were talking about implicit bias, we really have to take a reflection, as you said, and look at yourself. And that starts with leadership. And Dr. Montgomery, I know you said this is, you know, being different and not really understanding it. We have to, again, really reflect. Do we truly understand what diversity means? Do we truly understand what equity means? Do we truly understand what inclusion means? And, you know, and it's not just the students per se. We have to look at faculty and having a conversation about it, because we've done Tuesday topics. I'm just going to just say it like it is. We've done it. We've talked about it. DEI have addressed a lot of issues, and Dr. Carey and this whole team have presented different topics. And it just was interesting to me to see all the different topics she presented on racism, systemic racism, on implicit bias. You can go into Tuesday topics and listen to the recordings. And it's interesting. I'm so glad to see as many as we have now, because we're looking at the diverse population now. It's no longer, and I'm just being honest, majority, it's been Caucasians, white. This university is diverse. So diverse, immigrants, people from all over the world. And we have not embraced that. I am so happy to be at this point. And unfortunately, I wanted to say this because it wasn't engraved until we saw worldwide what happened to George Floyd all over the world. It was like a shock, as the young lady was saying. It's like she feels alone. It's like a culture shock as a student. That is how I have felt for many, many years. And I am so, unfortunately, he lost his life, but we are finally recognizing what needs to be done, what needs to be said. Voices who was not heard is finally being heard.
Denise,
And I'm just embracing everything. I don't want to take about all the time, but I am embracing it. And I am no longer, for many, many years, I was silent. But when I saw all those young people go out and talk, I'm no longer going to be silent. No longer. So I thank you for this opportunity.
That's right. That's right. Outstanding. I think we have time for, oh, go ahead, Stephanie.
May I respond to Dr. Wade though, because Dr. Wade, your points are so important. And so I think about, the workshops, the educating, the understanding, first order change, right? But now we're at a point where we really need to engage in second and third order thinking. We need to really be able to identify what are the systems of oppression, name them, and how they contribute to the problem. Then we need to open that up and explore. So the reflection, the pausing is all very important. The naming and the understanding of the problem is important, but we need to engage in second and third order change in order to make something happen. I'm with you on that.
And I want to celebrate again. I'm going to go to Jennifer, then we're going to summarize, but I wanted to share too that Dr. Way, I so appreciate the fact that you found your voice. You found a space to share your voice. I've seen you this is your second year as a board of diversity member, and I'm proud of how you've been able to navigate what historically you felt as if was a closed door, and now you're like a free bird. So I really appreciate you using your voice here today, especially. So absolutely, absolutely. Jennifer, and then I'm sorry, we don't have more time for one more, but Jennifer?
Yeah, I was going to say what strikes me, excuse me, as I listen to all this is how to choose among the various diversity issues. And it would, I think that, being an older woman and being in STEM, and it was very hard because most of my classmates and all that were men. But is that really as unfair a situation as saying somebody living as a person of color? And terribly, because of the atrocity that happened with George Floyd, I think what it starts to do is to put various forms of discrimination into perspective. And, I think sometimes it's hard if you're looking for empathy from someone who feels themselves have been put upon, or I think we need to learn to that you have to start ranking order, and some things are just more important and bigger than your experience. And I think if we could help our students and ourselves try to figure out how to rank order things, we might make a little bit of progress too.
And I think that's a perspective in terms of how, again, the lens and how you see the world, right? So rank and order makes you comfortable, and the lack of rank and order could make someone else uncomfortable, right? So I think that's a very good observation to share at this point too. So in order, it's 5 o'clock. I like to honor everyone's time. So I think that Dr. Montgomery and Brooks mentioned about the fact that we are supporting our graduates to meet our clients, our patients, our customers, our consumers in the future. that we are going to looking at it from the perspectives of social determinants of health. We're looking at the reduction of health disparities and health inequities. Also, while they're here, learning to work with individuals who could be clients, patients, consumers, whatever I said, right, that are dissimilar to themselves, right? We're also going to be looking at that systemic issue, and I made some notes about what Drs. Brooks and Montgomery shared, as well as my own goals. So right now, see yourself, whether you be a faculty, professional, staff, or student, sit with yourself right now as I read through these. We want to reduce oppression. Oppression sits in all three fields, all three stakeholders. So we want to reduce oppression, increase awareness of gender, ethnicity, class, disabilities, race, age. We want to increase mentorship across all three stakeholders, reduce isolation, reduce marginalization, reduce micro and macro aggressions, increase retention across all three stakeholders. We have a difficult time holding on to some of those populations that we mentioned earlier. We want to be our authentic selves. We want to have a or reception of others, or how people receive us. What are those preconceived notions? Dr. Brooks had mentioned about can't slow down. We have to move the needle, the disruption of oppression, the policies to inform practice, embrace difference now, to be able to speak about it and be heard, the recognition of implicit bias. We're kind of getting into what Dr. Montgomery had shared, systems moving, right, and contributing to the problem. And then I think one of the points that Dr. Nasser just made, it's hard. If you saw any value in today's conversation, please make sure your peers hear this or take it to your classrooms for discussion. This would be a great check-in across a couple of different 5 minutes across a whole quarter. Maybe you could look back at, as Dr. Way had mentioned, there's several Tuesday topic and other distinguished presenter series and other events that the Board of Diversity has offered. So please be sure to go to our YouTube channel and look at those recordings. So we're hoping it was a helpful conversation. Based on the feedback from it, we're probably going to hold several more. All right, so Brooks and Montgomery, get ready. All right, so all right, so thank you, Brenda. So thank you everyone for joining us, and have a great rest of the evening.